Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about the allegations of custodial torture against a police officer in Tamil Nadu. We also give you an update about the Oting firing of 2021, in which 6 young men were killed by the Indian Army in Nagaland. But first, we talk about heat waves. Last Sunday, 13 people died and around 20 were hospitalized in Maharashtra after suffering from dehydration and heat stroke while attending a government award function. The event was held in an open area in Navi Mumbai and is likely the highest heatwave-related death toll occurring from a single event.
We have not seen an incident like this, and that is also because a little before a decade, we were not maintaining records of heatwave deaths.
That's the Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha, who wrote about this incident for the paper.
There was no official record of heatwave deaths prior to, say, 2014-2015. So we do not know. I mean, these kind of things might have happened then, but after that, we have not come across a single event which has resulted in so many deaths because of heat stroke.
Now, the incident has once again put a spotlight on the dangers of heat waves and how they're likely to become more frequent because of climate change. In this segment, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to Amitabh about it.
Amitabh, right now Maharashtra does not have a heat wave-like condition. So how is it that people in this event ended up suffering from heat stroke?
Right. See, the common understanding about heat waves is that it involves very high temperatures. So whenever the temperatures go to 40 beyond, maybe 42, 43, 45, sometimes even more than that, it's a heat wave. Now, high temperatures in itself, while it might be very uncomfortable to people, in itself, they do not cause deaths. The human bodies, they are equipped to deal with high temperatures. And the way we do it is we sweat, right? So when we sweat, we release some moisture from our bodies, where the body cools down, and then we adapt ourselves to the high temperatures. Now, what causes heat wave or heat stroke deaths in most of the cases is that when high temperatures are combined with very high humidities, then that becomes deadly. The reason being that when you start to sweat, if the air is dry outside, our sweat gets absorbed. It gets evaporated into the atmosphere and the body cools down. But if there is high moisture in the atmosphere, this sweat does not evaporate. There is no way to get rid of this sweat. And that is the reason the body doesn't cool down adequately. And therefore, it leads to, in very common parlance, we can say your internal body temperature rises, and that leads to the heat stroke kind of situation. So most of the problems, human health, the heat related illnesses are a mixture of a combination of high temperature and high humidity. This is something called, scientists have a term for it, it's called wet bulb temperatures.
Okay, and how do wet bulb temperatures differ from other high temperatures? Is it just the addition of humidity that makes things deadly?
Yeah, and what we have seen is that while high temperatures, even in the order of like 45 degrees or 47 degrees, and sometimes, we have had instances where temperature has crossed 50 degrees in a couple of places in Rajasthan, body is able to bear it. But if the wet bulb temperature rises anywhere around 35, 36 degrees, it becomes deadly. It's very difficult for people to survive. It's really deadly. And that is what leads to these heat stroke deaths. Usually, right now, say in Delhi, the temperatures are around 40 degrees or 40, 41, 42 degrees centigrade. The wet bulb temperatures would be substantially lower. It would be in the range of 28, 29, 30, maybe if it's a particularly hot day, maybe 31 degrees. So it's well within the tolerance limit of people. It's only when it starts to touch near 35, 36 degrees that it becomes unbearable and leads to a lot of heat stroke related instances.
Right, so wet bulb temperature, which includes both humidity and heat, is what we need to look out for. Because, like you said, if that goes above 35 or 36 degrees, then that can be deadly. But as far as heat waves are considered, are things expected to get worse?
Okay, so now this year is predicted to be slightly warmer, and it's also predicted to have sustained spells of heat waves in different parts of the country. Now, we do not know. Heat waves cannot be, at a local level, they cannot be predicted with very high precision, right? So in general terms, across India, we would probably see many more heat waves in the coming months. And again, it happens every year. It's not something very uncommon that is happening. Just that this year, it's likely to be, the frequency is likely to be more. The number of spells of heat waves are likely to be more. Now, even under the climate change scenarios, heat waves are predicted, and not just in India, across the world, heat waves are predicted to become much more frequent, much more intense, and much more prolonged, right? And this is true for other parts of the world as well, not just in India. Last year, for example, Europe had a very prolonged heat wave. So under different climate change scenarios, this phenomenon is something that's likely to worsen in the coming months, in the coming years. That does not necessarily mean that we will have more heat stroke deaths, right? Heat stroke deaths are something that are very eminently avoidable. They can be avoided very easily with very simple steps. And in fact, in the last 1 decade, 10, 12 years in India, lots of steps have been taken, lots of response measures have been taken, because of which there has been a considerable decline in deaths being caused by heat strokes. It's eminently avoidable. Just because there is heat wave does not mean that it would result in deaths.
Right, and talking about how avoidable these deaths are, the last time India saw a massive number of deaths was in 2016, when more than 1,000 people died because of heat stroke. Since then, the numbers have reduced drastically, and last year, 33 people died. So could you talk about what helped in reducing these numbers?
So when we talk about numbers of heat stroke deaths, let's also keep it in mind these are all indicative numbers. Before 2014, 2015, very reliable figures are not available because the records were not being maintained. But even so, very, very simple measures that have been taken over the years by a number of state governments that has gone a long way in actually reducing the number of deaths. Now, very simple measures like making water available at public places. So, water easily accessible at public places. That's very simple, straightforward, but it makes a huge amount of difference. Also, lots of these urban municipal bodies, they started distributing ORS sachets, this mixture of salt and sugar, which can be mixed with water, and ready-made ORS sachets, which people can, drink when they feel dehydrated. So that was done in a number of cities which are prone to heat waves. Some cities also went in with some amount of activity management, like shifting the timings of the offices, shifting the timings of the schools and colleges, other educational institutions. So those kind of simple things, making provision for shades, especially for people working outdoors, the vegetable vendors, the rediwalas, construction workers, for those kind of people, simple shades that were built. Complete stoppage of work, for example, in the construction industry during the peak hours of the day. So these very, very simple measures were taken over the years. Most of the states, most of the districts now have these heat action plans that get activated the moment the temperatures go up. And what that has resulted in is a progressive decline in the number of deaths. So these kind of deaths, the heat-related deaths, can very easily be avoided. In fact, it can be brought down to zero that ways.
Okay, and Amitabh, coming back to where we started from, the deaths in Maharashtra. So the incident took place during a government event, and we know how much crowd government events can pull, right? And considering that this is an election year, we will see an increase in political gatherings, campaigns, and rallies. So, are there any guidelines in place to ensure that people do not suffer from heat waves or suffer heat strokes during these events?
Yeah. So there are advisories, there are guidelines in place for outdoor events like this when they are being conducted during the summer months or during heat waves. And they apply not just for political gatherings and political events, but all sorts of gatherings. Political parties and others who organize such events, they are routinely advised not to do it during the peak hours. Do it in the early mornings or in towards the afternoon, towards sunset and all. So those kind of things exist. Also, the fact that the organizers need to, make provisions for water, make provisions for ORS, make provisions for mobile ambulances, some doctors nearby. There has to be an exit which is easily accessible by everyone so that in the case of an emergency, people can be moved immediately to the hospital. Prompt medical attention is something that is very, very crucial in these kind of instances. So these guidelines exist, guidelines for political campaigning during elections. Those also exist, and they do incorporate some of these heat action plans, what to do. Even in the polling booths, for example, the kind of facilities that polling booths need to have, especially when the polling is happening during summer months where heat waves are likely to happen. Keep the place some shaded, provide water, have some seating place, those kind of things. Those are standard guidelines that are given to electoral officers as well. So those guidelines are in place. Mumbai, the kind of event that we saw earlier this week, which resulted in the 13 deaths. I mean, when you have that huge crowd, the best managed plans can go completely off hook. So that might have been the case. Mumbai was not exactly having very high temperatures, but there are other reasons why so many people succumb to heat wave in Mumbai. Some people might have come from very large distances. They might have been exhausted, and that's not a very ideal condition when you're dealing with heat wave. But in normal circumstances, most of these deaths, as I said, are completely avoidable with very, very simple measures. And if we continue to take that, we hopefully would not see a repeat of a situation like this.
A quick warning before we start this next segment. This story contains descriptions of brutal abuse and violence. And next we talk about the custodial torture allegations against an IPS officer in Tamil Nadu. A 30-year-old IPS officer named Balveer Singh has been accused of using brute force against over a dozen people. In some cases, even extracting their teeth with rocks and crushing their testicles. Singh is an assistant superintendent of police who was serving at Ambasamudram near Tirunelveli when the allegations first surfaced. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Arun Janardhanan, he told us more about Singh.
He is a very young officer in his 30s, an engineering graduate who worked with Indian Oil Corporation Faridabad for some time. And he joined service very recently, he's 2020 batch IPS.
Arun says that the first set of allegations against him was shared on social media last month by a local lawyer named Maharajan.
So sometime in March, he was approached by people from a nearby village. They had come to invite him for a temple festival happening in their village. So during that casual conversation, one of them immediately mentioned about a recent case in which a youth from the village was arrested and tortured by police.
The incident Arun is referring to here involved a young man named Surya who, while drunk, damaged 3 CCTV cameras. and his teeth were pulled out during a torture session which was allegedly led by Balveer Singh. Surya was then asked to pay rupees 45,000 for the damaged CCTV cameras, or he would lose more teeth. This is the story that Maharajan, the lawyer, came to know about.
So immediately after coming to know about the story, the local lawyer, he contacted this victim, a youth, and his statement was taken, and he put out the stories about this particular incident, torture incident, on social media, and also there was a small press conference held at Tirunelveli. So seeing this lawyer's videos on YouTube, more people started reaching out to him. A total of 13 people finally reported to this lawyer, and the government had to take action.
Turns out there were clear similarities in the statements of all 13 victims. In almost every case, the victim was taken into custody for a petty crime, ranging from brawls to domestic disputes. And all of the torture sessions took place inside a police station, specifically in a room that the police personnel used to eat food or take rest in.
So when these victims are taken to this room for torture, Balveer Singh will change dress and he will come in shorts and wearing a gloves and wearing slippers. He will enter the scene. There will be inspectors, there will be ASP's gunmen, a driver. All these people will be there to assist the Balveer Singh in the torture session. The most common thing reported by victims were that there will be a jelly rock. So jelly rock may be seemingly, it is more stronger than an ordinary rock. There will be one or two jelly rocks. Each victim will be tortured in a session in which 2 or 3 people, mostly inspectors, gunmen, etc. So they will be holding this man by head and by his hands either side, and Balveer Singh will start hitting on the teeth with this jelly rock. He will start from one teeth, he will go to another, and finally he will start hitting on a single teeth until it is falling down.
And apart from pulling out the victim's teeth, Balveer Singh has also been accused of crushing someone's testicles. During a torture session, Singh got to know that one of the victims was recently married. His brother, who was also arrested and present in the room, requested Singh not to harm his recently married brother.
So what Balveer Singh did was he did not stop with that, but he crushed his testicles. An incident we were told by 2 victims, including this elder brother. So that man is now undergoing treatments. He's still not stable.
During the torture session, victims would try to say things to Singh in order to pacify him. But their pleas would go unheard because Singh was from Rajasthan and did not understand the regional language. And it's important to mention that other police officers in the station wouldn't speak up against the torture sessions, as Singh, an assistant superintendent, would be higher in rank than most of them. Arun talks about the time when the SP once got to know about a torture session.
So SP came to know about this incident, immediately called up Balveer Singh and shouted at him and warned him that, never repeat it. But interestingly, SP also did not do anything beyond that, or we don't have any such knowledge. When I spoke to SP seeking a comment on this particular incident, he said it wouldn't be fair from his part to comment about that.
Now, soon after the accusation surfaced, Balveer and several other police officials were removed from their post, and Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin announced Singh's suspension in the State Assembly. A magisterial inquiry was also conducted to look into the allegations. But according to Arun, several IPS officers banded together to protect Balveer by delaying the FIR.
Interestingly, there was no action taken, or there was a very conscious effort to delay the criminal charges or delaying an FIR. So the logic explained by senior officials in this matter is that Balveer Singh is a very young officer. And like everything and anything around in these days, IPS officers are also belongs to a clan. There is a collective, or there is a collective identity of officers. So the moment like a particular caste or community get affected and they mobilize and they join hands together to protect that person, almost the same thing happened in this case also. There was a strong opposition from the IPS lobby against registering an FIR.
And in the meantime, several among the 13 alleged victims said they were facing police pressure to retract their statements.
When we visited witnesses 2 weeks ago, they said that, how police was putting pressure on them through different people, through relatives, through some lawyers, some strange faces reaching home and telling them that, why do you want to go for these kind of troubles? You take some money. And some of these victims, they had some criminal past. So police promised some of them that, they will come out of all these cases if they withdraw their statements against Balveer Singh. Also, interestingly, there are some very conventional methods in which the police tried to erect banners, posters in some villages in the name of public, demanding to cancel or demanding to withdraw the action against Balveer Singh, saying that he's the man who brought peace to these, villages.
Eventually, the victims got together to approach the Madras High Court, and Arun says that there is even a petition that's being filed in the Supreme Court, and that is what has put pressure on the government, and the reason why it finally gave the green signal for the police to register an FIR against Balveer Singh on Monday. But what Arun thinks is interesting is the fact that while civil society and activist groups raised the demand for an FIR against Balveer Singh, none of the major political parties like the AIADMK or BJP raised this demand.
None of them really raised their voice against Balveer Singh or demanded an FIR. At the same time, there were parties like CPM. CPM is part of DMK Alliance. They organized a protest in Tirunelveli for the fact that they have a very good party machinery in that district. Otherwise, there were no major political parties or politicians, raising this demand. Not ADMK, no BJP, nothing.
And in the end, we talk about Nagaland. In December 2021, 6 young men were killed by the Indian Army in the Mon district of Nagaland. At the time, the security forces had claimed that this was a case of mistaken identities. It's been more than a year since that happened, and still no action has been taken against the men involved. Here is Indian Express's Tora Agarwala revisiting the incident.
So on December 4th, 2021, the Indian Army's 21 Para Special Force had opened fire at a truck in Nagaland's Oting village. 6 people had died on the spot and 2 were immediately taken to the hospital and they survived. The army was leading a counter-insurgency operation and they thought the people in the pickup truck were insurgents from the banned NSCN KYA faction. But later it turned out that none of these people were insurgents. In fact, they were ordinary villagers who were coming back home after a day of work at a coal mine near their village. So this is what had happened, and naturally it had led to wide public outrage in Nagaland and across the Northeast.
The incident caused huge public outrage, and Tora said that this led to the Nagaland government setting up a special investigation team, an SIT.
And last year in May, the SIT completed its investigation. After 3 to 4 months, they submitted a report, and based on the report, the Nagaland police filed a charge sheet. And in this charge sheet, all the 30 army men who were involved in the operation, and this also included the team leader who is of a major rank, and all of them were accused of attempt to murder. So the SIT concluded that all the victims were shot at with a clear intention to kill. And when I say this, I'm quoting directly from the SIT's findings. It also accused the team commander, the major, of conspiring to kill the victims in spite of the fact that ground sources' input was different. So this is the summary of the SIT's report.
And besides this, the army had even initiated a court of inquiry into the matter. but no action had been taken in the matter so far. And this is because the matter is now stuck in the Supreme Court. Tora explains that it was the wives of the army officers involved in the case who had filed a petition in the Supreme Court.
And they had basically asked the Supreme Court to stay the proceedings on this particular SIT's charge sheet, okay? And they had invoked the immunity the AFSPA offers to security forces. So after that, in July 2022, the Supreme Court had stayed the proceedings on this particular charge sheet. And they had also cited the AFSPA, and they had said that till the center gives prosecution sanction, this particular case should be stayed.
Now, AFSPA, or the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, gives sweeping powers to the forces and has faced severe criticism in the past.
So, under the AFSPA, security personnel can open fire, you can arrest without warrant based on suspicion. And many parts of the Northeast states like Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur have faced the brunt of this act because the allegation is that security forces have used this and, used the pretext of the AFSPA to do mass killings. There have been allegation of rape and things like that. An important part of the AFSPA is that it provides blanket impunity to the security personnel involved in these operations. So even if the investigation finds the armed forces who were part of the operation as guilty or there are allegations against them, there can be no prosecution or legal proceedings against the forces without prior approval of the center. So this is what the sanction to prosecute is all about.
And this is why the SIT and the Nagaland police were waiting for the permission of the central government so that these officers could be prosecuted.
But last week, the center basically informed that they are denying permission to prosecute any of the army personnel involved. And I think overall, it just seems that nothing is going to happen in the case anymore. The army people who were involved in this particular incident, no legal proceedings can happen against them. And it is also important to record that the entire team who was involved in the incident continues to be on duty, and except for one who has since then retired.
She said that all this while, the families of the victims had been holding on to the hope that they will get justice. But this decision has left them feeling even worse than before.
Because it clearly means that nothing is going to happen to those who were involved in the incident. So many of them are asking, do our lives mean nothing? The SIT had clearly said that these army officers involved did it deliberately and did not follow security protocols. So why are they not being punished? So many of the families are saying that. Apart from that, in an unfortunate turn for the families, the civil society groups like the Cognac Union, the Eastern Nagaland People's Fronts, and in these parts of Northeast, these civil society groups, they hold a lot of sway. They were initially helping these families, sort of guiding them and also putting up a resistance against the center right after this incident happened. So there were massive protests in Nagaland. But most of this anger seems to have dissipated a lot since then. And the villagers feel that the state government and the civil society organizations who were mediating on behalf of them are not pursuing the matter anymore. So they feel that they have, no one to go to. They don't have anyone to guide them, even if they want to pursue this case legally. So, in this vacuum of no one helping them, they feel really betrayed. And, the one question they keep asking is, who do we turn to now?
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by me, Rahel Philipose, Utsa Sarmin, Shashank Bhargava, and Anwiti Singh, who originally spoke to Tora Agarwala for the Nagaland story. It was edited and mixed by Abhishek Kumar. If you liked the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think would like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family, It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at @Express Podcast and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.